executive session, and we do have a statement to make. Tonight, the Board of Selectmen voted to appeal a decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals that operations of Wind 1 and Wind 2 are a nuisance. Our decision to appeal was made to protect the financial interests of the town in response to a pending lawsuit and other pending claims seeking money damages from the town based upon nuisance law. The Board of Selectmen retains authority over the operation of the wind turbines and will continue to seek a resolution of all issues related to the turbines, including ceasing operation or other disposition. And that is all we're going to have to say at this time. Next item on our agenda, and we're right on time, is to vote and appoint committee members. And for the record and for the board's edification, I have consulted with town council, and all members of the board may participate in these votes. There have been questions in the past about whether a member of the board could participate, but those situations apply only to public hearings where evidence is taken. And so in this situation, in the appointment of positions, Ms. Moffett, even though she is new to the board, she has every right to participate in the votes.
Could you remind me how many votes we need to appoint someone to regulatory boards?
It is the same number as any other. It would be a majority.
Okay.
All right, so first up we have the Board of Health. We have two candidates, and we have two terms available, two seats available, two candidates up for reappointment. We have a motion.
I would put the names of Stephen Rafferty and John Waterbury in nomination.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right. So we have Mr. Rafferty and Mr. Waterbury. I'll go down the row here. Ms. Moffett?
Mr. Waterbury.
You can vote for
To
two,
vote.
actually. I apologize. I should have
Excuse me.
clarified that.
Okay, then. Stephen Rafferty and John Waterbury.
Mr. Jones?
Stephen Rafferty, John Waterbury.
Mr. Murphy?
Waterbury Rafferty.
Ms. Flynn?
Mr. Rafferty and Mr. Waterbury.
And I will make it unanimous. Mr. Rafferty and Mr. Waterbury are both unanimously reappointed. Thank you, gentlemen. And second on our list here, we have one incumbent up for reappointment for Conservation Commission, Michelle West.
I would move putting Michelle West's name in consideration for the
Second.
Conservation Commission and term ending June 30th, 2016.
A motion and a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of the nomination?
Aye.
Any objections? Unanimous? All right, one name in nomination. Ms. Moffett?
Michelle West.
Mr. Jones?
Michelle West.
Mr. Murphy?
West.
Ms. Flynn?
Michelle West.
And I will make it unanimous. Ms. West is reappointed. Next up, we have the Historical Commission. We have one incumbent up for reappointment, Heidi Waltz, for a term until June 30, 2016.
I'll move putting Heidi Waltz's name in for nomination to the Historical Commission, term
Second.
ending June 30th, 2016.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the nomination?
Aye.
Any objections? Unanimous? All right, and the roll call vote. Ms. Moffett?
Heidi Watts.
Mr. Jones?
Heidi Waltz.
Ms. Flynn?
Heidi Walsh.
Mr. Murphy?
Heidi Waltz.
And I will make it unanimous. Ms. Waltz is reappointed. And we have the Historic Districts Commission. We have two incumbents up for reappointment, terms expiring June 30, 2018. Tamsin George and Edward Haddad.
Make a motion to put both names into nomination.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous? And the roll call. Ms. Moffett?
Tamsin George and Ed Haddad.
Mr. Jones?
Tamsin George, Edward Haddad.
Ms. Flynn?
Tamsin George, Edward Haddad.
Mr. Murphy?
George and Haddad.
And I'll make it unanimous. Ms. George and Mr. Haddad, and they are both up appointed. And finally, this evening, we have Zoning Board of Appeals. We have one incumbent up for reappointment, a term expiring June 30, 2018, Matthew McNamara.
I just had one question. I know the Historic Districts Commission is a 5-year term. Is the Zoning Board of Appeals also 5-year?
It is.
Okay. I move putting Matt McNamara in nomination for the Zoning Board of Appeals, terminating 6/30/18.
Second?
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? None? All right. Roll call. Ms. Moffett?
Matt McNamara.
Mr. Jones?
Matt McNamara?
Ms. Flynn?
Matt McNamara?
Mr. Murphy?
Matt McNamara.
And I'll make it unanimous. Mr. McNamara is reappointed. Congratulations to all of our appointments, and thank you all for interviewing with us again. We do appreciate you taking the time. And that concludes that item on our agenda. We moved through that swiftly. We want to move on to the next agenda item, or why don't we take the summary of actions? We can dispense with that. We've got a few moments. So, under the summary of actions, we have, I'm going to read these off, and if anyone wants to hold one for any reason, please just let me know. We have a request for a special event, Paul White Road Race, North Falmouth, July 16, 2013. Request for a special event, Cape Cod Marathon, Half Marathon, and Marathon Relay, October 26, 2013, and October 27, 2013. We have approved a request for a beach wedding, Surf Drive Beach, Megan Stam, July 13, 2013. We have approved request for a one-day liquor license.
Hold.
We'll hold that. Item 5, approved request for a one-day liquor license.
Hold.
We'll hold that. Item 6, approved request for a one-day liquor license. Knights of Columbus Pig Roast, Tony
Hold.
Andrews Farm. We'll hold that. Number 7, approved request for special agricultural liquor license, Coastal
Hold.
Vineyards. We'll hold that. Item number 8, ratify sign variance approval for the Vips Feasts of Falmouth. And item number 9, approved request for sign variance. This is off-premise signs, Falmouth Rotary Pancake Breakfast, June 16, 2013. All right, so I need a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. And Mr. Murphy, you held 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yes, just for disclosure purposes, I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Excuse me.
Yes.
If I may, a correction. This is not being held at Highfield Hall. It's at 50 Highfield Drive, which is the conservatory. So it's being held at the conservatory, not at
conservatory.
Highfield Hall.
Item number 4.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
So,
So,
okay, so I'd like to make a motion to, with that disclosure, approve items number 4, items number 5, number 6, and then I'd like to talk about number 7. So a motion to approve 4, 5, and 6 with my disclosure.
Okay.
second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 4, 5, and 6. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous.
On item number 7, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve with, well, first of all, I'd like to disclose that I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license. I make a motion to approve, however, because it is on town property, require liquor liability insurance from the vendor.
Okay, so we have that motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second. Oh, sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. All right, good. Fast and furious. All right, and that brings us to 8:20 and the next item on our agenda, which is vote to participate in the LED streetlight conversion. And we believe we have a presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we should have a representative.
Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry, pardon me.
Come to the,
Kevin Galligan, I'm Program Manager with the Cape Light Compact. If you prefer, we could avoid the screen and the PowerPoint, although I know, and thanks to town staff for queuing this up, but the one-page summary, if you have it in your packets, if not, I brought ample copies for you and any members of the public that might be interested.
if you wouldn't mind, the public at home might
Sure.
appreciate the presentation, exactly what it is that we're doing here.
Sure.
You're dropping it.
said 50 Highfield, not on the application. The town was interpreted to me it was the Highfield, and it isn't. I caught it when I was reading it. Yeah, because we wrote the licensing in the wrong place. And I'm saying, they would not have it at Highfield because they could have it at the wrong place. See, it says Highfield Drive. So I don't know, they just feel like Highfield Drive was Highfield Hall, they just read the, oh man, mistake. No, this is correct.
We seem to be having technical difficulties, is that fair to say?
We can certainly go with my review of the presentation that you have, and I mentioned to Heather that what we could do is for the public on the town's website, and certainly on the Cape Light Compact website, we can post the presentation, which has been referred to a number of times in other public venues, so I'm happy to go through that with you. The thing, if I could, for you, and again, for the public that's here, if anyone's interested, this is just a one-pager. I'll leave it here, and if the public's interested. The Board of Selectmen has this already, but again, as I mentioned at the outset, I'm Kevin Galligan. I'm Program Manager with the Cape Light Compact. I'm happy to be here because this is one of the most exciting projects that the Cape Light Compact on all of our behalf is undertaking. We are excited, and especially for a town like Falmouth to have a significant number of streetlights, to be aggregating all the streetlights across the Cape and Vineyard, which number in excess of 14,000 lights. You guys do take the prize for having the most streetlights, which is why I'm very happy to finally be here, because through your town staff have been very anxious for this day to come. They've been very aggressive with energy efficiency, both in this building and throughout town buildings, but streetlights will save you a significant amount of dollars. So as you can see in your handout, you participated in what we refer to as the demonstration project, which was merely to test the technology. We certainly had a lot of experience in terms of the industry, that LEDs were becoming commercialized to the point that we felt confident to advance them throughout our communities. 8 LEDs were installed back in February. They've actually held up very well. The performance of the LEDs that we chose, I actually did bring a sample here, so if the board would like me to open it up and show you, I'm happy to do that. But 4 were installed in what we call residential areas along Seacoast shores between Hartwell and Yale Drive, 4 in what was designated a commercial area from the police station to the Gus Canty Recreation Building. And by passers-by and the public, the town staff, they have given us feedback in terms of what folks liked about them, what they didn't. And again, this is Cape Cod. Every town is different, and I'll tell you honestly, even in my town of Orleans, change is change, and it causes people to respond. And we did get a number of responses. Some, the roadway lighting was very well lit through the LEDs compared to the high-pressure sodium, but at the same time, we heard a lot of concerns about the brightness of the light. It's a very white LED model that we chose, and as a result, jumping ahead to the longer presentation that you've got, we are going in the base bid specifications for a warmer light. The technical term for the light that is installed through the demonstration project is a 6,000 Kelvin light. That's the measure of the color temperature. We're going to be going in the bid package with a base bid of around 4,000 Kelvin, plus or minus 300. Some communities may wish to vary that, and that certainly is your call. We've worked with your DPW folks, your highway engineer, to specify, are there some locations that you all may want to revise to either be even further softening of the light. And that certainly is a town's option in what you'll be deliberating tonight to vote on in Exhibit A to the participation agreement. So the summary, as I mentioned, was through the feedback that we gathered through May. We've met with the DPW directors, the different town leads to inform them, as well as have them inform us. And here we are tonight in terms of having your consideration to proceed with the full retrofit of all the town lights. And what would end up happening with your consent, as other towns are considering and moving forward with the execution of the participation agreement, and as I mentioned, the special terms and conditions on that Exhibit A, is to have, through the Cape Light Compact, we would put all of the lights together in an inventory that would be part of the RFP, the bid package, that would include the scopes, the product specifications, all the electrical and safety and roadway standards that the contractors bidding on this work would have to meet. There are basically two parts to the scope. One is the contractors will be responsible for the initial design, the procurement, the installation of the LEDs in place of the old high-pressure sodium, as well as proper disposal and removal. And then the second part is, as you know, we currently under a maintenance contract through Siemens Republic ITS. That contract comes up at the end of this year. So it's important that we put that aspect into this RFP so that maintenance will allow to proceed under a new competitively bid contract. We expect to be able to go out to bid in July, as the presentation mentions. We're giving a couple of months. It is the summertime. We also expect a significant interest in this, so we're going to give some time to review the bidders, bring them in to shortlist them and have them show us their lights that they're proposing, the teams and the crews that they expect to install these, because again, a significant number of lights, they're likely going to be a significant number of work crews to get the job done. So we expect to award in September. There is expected to be some time to finalize contract negotiations, finalize the light selection. Likely orders will go in by January, and installation should begin shortly thereafter. We are going to specify a time to complete the work, the majority of the work, by June of next year, and are considering, you know, there'll be some follow-up that may be required, whether they missed it on a light or wanted to maybe shut down by June so that they get the bucket trucks off our streets in the summer, and then come back in the fall and finish up by the end of 2014. But for all intents and purposes, particularly from a budget standpoint, we expect all of the lights to be installed across all the communities by June, so thereby starting your fiscal year 15, you'll be able to book the energy savings, as well as we'll likely see significant maintenance savings, because for one, these are brand new LED lights. They will have their own warranty associated with it. So the maintenance that you're currently seeing, we expect will also be quite substantially lowered from the current pricing. So by putting this out as a package, we certainly will be bringing benefits for not only Falmouth, but all the communities that participate, and even the smallest ones. But as I mentioned, as you can see on the slide, you have over 2,500 streetlights. It's a very significant number. But likewise, the energy savings we're estimating is in the neighborhood of 40 to 50% of the current bill that you see for your streetlights, which is over $100,000 of annual savings. LEDs are expected to last for 10, 15 years, so those savings are going to accrue for a very long time. Not to mention, as I indicated, the lower energy use, longer life expectancy, quality of the light is improved relative to the roadway illumination. The only, full disclosure here is that the police details, although we covered them in the demonstration project, are the town's responsibility. And we would certainly coordinate with you and the contractors to, find the best time to schedule the work, as well as, try to minimize that such that there may be cul-de-sacs or low-use roads that we could minimize detail, but at the same time, we do want adequate road coverage where safety crews and the installation crew is important. So that's just the one page overhead. You did get the full presentation that I'll work with town staff to get uploaded. It's about a 16-slide PowerPoint that goes into a little bit more detail in terms of the scope and whatnot. But frankly, I think, given what I've reviewed and also your town's very active interest in energy efficiency, I'd be more interested to hear if you have any questions for me. Likewise, if I could show you the sample of what is installed now, if that would be of any help to you, I could certainly do that. So what's your pleasure?
I have a question. This town got ourselves in a little bit of a trick box by authorizing something, and then we ended up changing what we originally authorized because it happened to be available. We've had a demonstration project on Main Street, and you're proposing that we change the lights that we're actually going to buy that are different than what was installed in our demonstration projects. Is it possible for us to get the different wattage, for the lack of a better term, lights installed somewhere, so this board would actually know what it's voting on? We're not voting on what we have in our demonstration project, am I wrong?
Lower Kelvins.
You're voting on supporting the specifications that we'll go out with. This model that I've got, for example, is made by one particular manufacturer. When you go out to bid, you don't specify exactly that manufacturer. You say what lumens we want, what standards across the whole product spectrum we're looking for. If you do want to be as crystal clear as you can be, and another community is exactly considering this right now, that Exhibit A to your participation agreement that you may vote to go forward with could include the requirement that you ask the proposers to consider equipment lighting equivalent to what you have, and we can attach the cut sheet for exactly the same fixture you have now, if that's what your wishes are.
But my question is, and you brought this up originally in your presentation, how you got some feedback that folks wanted a little less than what's there now.
Exactly.
We have no knowledge of what a little less actually means. It would be great if we actually could install something that is a little less and we have an idea what it looks like. We had a wind turbine that was a little bit more than what we thought. And that's where our problem stayed.
Understood.
We want to know what we're buying. And at least I do.
Right.
So unless I can see it, feel it, touch it, I'm not comfortable with moving forward with something that's going to be a little less luminaires or whatever you might want to call it.
Understood. Today, you can look at a 4,300 Kelvin lamp right in Barnstable Village at the intersection of Route 6A and Finney's Lane. It's technically called Hyannis Road, but most people call it Finney's. Right at that intersection is a 4,300 Kelvin streetlight, just like this model is, except instead of a 6,000 Kelvin color, it's not as blue, it's a little bit warmer light. So you can see that today. Likewise, we are doing an additional demonstration test in the next few days with Provincetown, installing 4 additional demonstration lights for them to consider an even warmer light at 3,500 Kelvin. But the base bid that we are going out with, that seems to be what the standard is across the nation, is this 4,000, 4,300 Kelvin. The 6,000 is a very efficient light, meaning you put the fewest amount of watts into the fixture to get the most light output, but that generates these concerns about the harshness of the light, which is why the 4,000, 4,300 color is what is becoming the standard. So you could look at that right now.
You're not following my question. My question is, we have to have public buy-in as well, and I don't think everyone's going to schlep in their car and go over to Barnstable. We put up some streetlights in this community to be able to show folks what they look like. Can we put up a couple of these lights that have the 4,000 versus the 6,000 so people will know what just because some folks called you and said it was too bright, it could be too dim, the 4,000 to other folks. So we have to make a value judgment. We want to know it's apples to oranges, and I don't think it's fair for us to make a decision tonight saying, oh, it's going to be 4,000 versus 6, but we don't know what 4,000 is.
I could bring that back. I don't have the authorization to, acquire and get the contractor out, because that does burden the budget, and I don't have the power to do that. The other thing is the excitement for LEDs nationwide causes a long lead time on these, so the order time would be 6 to 8 weeks. You would miss the bid to go out to bid July 12th. However, that's not to say that we couldn't supplement it at some point. Or, once the award takes place, you might jump in after that. So I could certainly bring it back and get back to you on that.
I'm just one voice, I just wanted to.
Well,
It is a 50% reduction.
Why is this any different, what you're asking about, than what is out at Seacoast Shores right now and at the police department? What is the difference?
What he's been describing is that it's the color of the light. That what we have out there now are 6,000 Kelvin, which is a bluish color, versus what's being proposed is closer to 4,000 Kelvin, which is a softer, more yellowish light. Is that fair?
None of these lights are ever going to be yellow, but you're
Right.
right. It's a little bit softer. The way an LED is configured, it's a combination of red, green, and blue. And sometimes on the brighter outputs, the red of the LED comes through stronger, and other cases, more of the yellow will come out. So you're getting, basically the equivalent lumens, which is the roadway illumination, with just a little softer white than you would with the 6,000. But again, if the board wishes to, delay on this, that's your call.
But it really is a color differentiation, not illumination.
It is not illumination. That's the thing with lighting. We could spend almost a course at Cape Cod Community College going over lighting, but the aspects of the specs on the product will include, the illumination level, which is measured in lumens, and those will be equal to, unless the town designates lower or higher, but equal to what you have today. So if you're looking at the lumens on Main Street that today is 4,000, the contractors are going to be asked to provide equal to that, unless otherwise indicated. But the way that light appears to your eye, and it's a rods and cones thing in terms of how people's perception is, and you're right to, be concerned about it, is, people notice light, and they do notice a change. But what we do know nationwide is by going away from the 6,000 Kelvin, which we've tested, and you have not had negative reaction in Falmouth. By going to the 4, it could only improve the visibility and the perception on the public.
Can I have one follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying the complaints you've had were not from Falmouth?
No, Falmouth has actually been, very favorable.
So why would you propose that we go to the 4? We didn't have any feedback from the folks in Seacoast Shores, no feedback from the folks in front of the police department that was negative to that. I'm trying to get why you would propose that here if we had no negative feedback.
Perfectly good question. When you go out to bid, we want a base bid, which is a base specification. The contractor can look and say, this is the specs that they want for all 14,000 lights. What we've also provided for each participant is exceptions. So if, for example, Falmouth does want to specify, as we understand another community may be interested in doing, a fixture that is very similar to the one that we've installed in the demo, that would include the 6,000, that would include the other, design features and the look of it, you can specify that as well. That's totally your call. But from a standpoint of going out to bid, it's more helpful for us and contractors to bid on when they see one set of specs with options that some participants might want to consider.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question? If I might, I know other members of the board have questions. Is there a website somewhere that would have correct color rendition that would show the differentiation between these two lights side by side? I think you need a side-by-side comparison, not one that's sitting in isolation, maybe next to a high-pressure sodium lamp that wouldn't give you a good... That's a difficulty with our driving from Falmouth to Barnstable and remembering what Falmouth looked like and then trying to compare it to Barnstable.
It is difficult to put that up on a screen for you to really observe it. Lighting is a perception thing, and you have to be out there to experience it. The benefit, and again, not encouraging you or requiring you to go there, but that at that intersection on 6A, you actually have both a 6,000 Kelvin on the side with the millway that goes down to the shore, and then across the side heading up Finney's, which is 4,300. So you have your 6,000 Kelvin and you have your 43. So you do see a direct comparison just by standing at that intersection one evening.
Can you transmit a map to us that would show us
I certainly
exactly
can.
where those are located?
Yep, I certainly can.
Thank you.
A question is, what feedback are you getting from Barnstable down there at Finney's Lane where those two different?
We've had concerns expressed.
You have?
Significant concerns, particularly from the historic district folks. Those along 6A are very concerned about LED lighting in
Period.
general.
Oh.
They do feel LED lighting is much more industrial lighting, they want to, have consideration of other options. I've not met with the Barnstable Fire District yet. That's coming up next week, so we'll have a little bit more dialogue and sharing of information with them.
And then has there been any more favorable comments regarding the one that's warmer than the one that's more blue
As far as the
at that intersection?
intersection-
I'll go down there tomorrow afternoon, take a look at it.
I
the-
think
Wait
you're gonna
to-
see it in
no,
the afternoon.
No, when I meant when I'm there, I will stay until it gets dark. Go
Or
ahead.
early in the morning.
Oh,
Sometimes you're up very early, so they'll be on by 4:30 still. But
Now, you know I'm not there at 4:30 in the morning.
that one individual that is near that intersection still is annoyed. So it is a district, concern that will have to be addressed. And we are doing everything possible. The thing I've said to other communities is we want, particularly given the longevity of these lights, 10 to 15 years, we want product to be in there that we all are going to be happy with. We all live here. And
One more quick, what about the lights that are installed by the Dennis Police Station? Aren't they the same two lights?
Those are the 6,000 Kelvin. And
They're the 6,000 Kelvin.
they're very
Because
happy with them.
They are very happy, and when you drive down that road, you can tell the difference from where the intersection where the police station is and further down where the old light is. It makes for a very, I think, very good illumination, really.
The other added requirement that we've learned through the demonstration project that we're putting into the specs is full cutoff lighting. And that term basically means that, particularly in residential areas, you will not have light trespass that would, cause any glaring into homes. The other thing is the products that we are now seeing, this product is already out of date because it's a year old, but they're actually installing what are called field-installed shields. Some products used to do it on some of the high-pressure sodiums, but LEDs used to have to be specified at the time of order. And if you missed it on the order, then you had to go through the whole purchase cycle again. But now we're hearing about shields that can be installed in the field that can adjust for concerns from residences, businesses. So they are coming along the way. The more we put out to, as I mentioned, to the proposers, the contractors, in terms of what we expect of them, will actually give us a lot of options to consider. So, but no, I'd be happy to follow up, as your town administrator mentioned, in terms of some comparatives. I could actually put together a little PowerPoint with just 3 images tonight or tomorrow morning and get it to you that would show you a 6,000 Kelvin light, 4,300, and we will have a 3,500 Kelvin in Provincetown in a few days.
It just baffles my mind why we would try a pilot and then change it afterwards without looking at it. Why would you have even proposed to have installed them to begin with if we weren't going to, those aren't going to be the things we're going to ultimately buy? And I really don't care what they like in Barnstable. I care what the folks in Falmouth like, because they're the ones who vote for us and pay the taxes.
As you should.
And they've seemed to be happy with the ones at Seacoast Shores. I know I rode out there. We have an aging population, and being able to illuminate the roads in situations is important for these folks. The reason we have so many streetlights is because we put them in intersections, really not on the roads necessarily, but at the intersections of all of our developments. And this board, I wasn't on it at the time, wrestled with the fact of cutting out some streetlights and talk about folks going crazy. So,
Well,
You
if-
actually, over the years, I've followed it, you have actually a policy, that is good guidance for you in terms of, requests to come in. I certainly see that even if you did wish to proceed with a vote tonight, you could make it subject to, in use of Exhibit A, requiring that bidders propose to use lights that are like, and again, I can offer the cut sheet exactly of the specs that are on the lights that are installed, but then the added protections that you have relative to glare, things that we've learned, will also be in the base bid. So, you certainly could add that provision as a requirement in Exhibit A to the participation agreement, that the lights that Falmouth would see proposed would be like the ones that are installed through the demo. We're not trying to change it. What we're trying to do is, collaborate in a collective effort and also be mindful of, sensitivities and concerns. But I would agree with you. I do believe the 6,000 Kelvin from a roadway safety standpoint, from railroad crossings, from, the intersections that you mentioned is really what you have as a guidance. They are very good products. They're excellent.
Go ahead, Doug.
These are replacing the Cobra heads.
Correct.
Not replacing the historic lights on Main Street, or we're going to stick with those that we have right now.
Correct.
I'm concerned 15 years from now, we're going to have a very large bill to replace these.
To
Are these-
replace, which, the LEDs?
Right. I mean, are there, the cost of these, the way you've described the whole project, this sounds like a win-win-win, there's no lose to it. They've got to cost more than what we're doing, than what a present one is, and if we replace them all right next year, they're all going to come up for replacement at about the same time. And I would worry that we may be setting up one budget year that's going to be costing a good deal to replace.
Again, 3 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be here. I mean, frankly, the cost of LEDs have come down significantly. That's not to say that, and one of the fire districts actually had that concern, and what they're doing because of the significant savings. I mean, they're reducing their energy bill by half. They're actually reserving some money every year in a fund that would be used, whenever a replacement might be needed. But the other thing is, we are going out to bid for your operation and maintenance. So you'll actually have a bulk price fixed for the replacement of a light at any point in time.
Okay.
But it's right to have that concern. And who knows what the next lighting technology will be. It may not even be on poles. Who knows?
Just want to add a little information to that. The last time the town was relamped was when we lamped the current sodium vapor lamps that we have. NSTAR did that project with the town. When the town purchased its streetlights 10, 12 years ago, those lights were at the end of their useful life. So nearly 80 to 90% of our inventory now is fully depreciated. And so we're in sort of the same boat we might be in 10, 15 years from now with this relamping. So it is a risk. It's a great question. But it's the same kind of position that we're in now. So it has the double benefit of replacing a completely depreciated system.
And what do we do with the next 8 months as lights burn out?
Well, they're maintained. They are
They are
maintained.
covered under maintenance through December 31. But another piece of information to consider on that, and you can believe the literature, whatever, but what I'm reading is by 2020, the high-pressure sodiums will no longer be supported. They may not even be produced in a way that you could replace them. So, it's, a less efficient technology than LEDs. So, like mercury vapor that got replaced by high-pressure sodium, you couldn't buy a mercury vapor today because it's been banned. So, this is the direction it's going, but you're right to provide for, that replacement at some future date.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed from the packet, it seems to indicate that the board has until June 14th to make a determination. If that's the case, perhaps you'd care to carry this for a week and allow the board to look at these issues that just arose tonight, to give you just a little bit more time to make an informed decision on that one aspect.
That was actually going to be one of my questions, was, so if we were to hold off for a week, would that perhaps give the board some time to feel more comfortable about the decision? There were a few things some observations and questions that I had. One of them, and Mr. Murphy alluded to it a few years ago in the height of our attempt to tighten our belts, we actually looked at red capping, in other words, temporarily turning off a number of streetlights. And that, we were conservatively estimating, I think, about $50,000 in savings, and of course, there was a huge uproar because nobody wanted to have their streetlights turned off even temporarily. So the fact that we might be able to save twice as much and retain all of the streetlights, I think, is an attractive possibility here. For the board's edification, a neat thing of the power of the internet, we were talking about kelvins, and I looked this up, that for comparison's sake, the 6,000 Kelvin is roughly daylight versus the 4,000 Kelvin, which is more like moonlight in terms of the color. So we might actually find that people are more agreeable with the 4,000 Kelvin. Remember also that the demonstrations are exactly that. There's a handful of lights in one section, and if we were to put lights like that throughout the town, there might be a very different response than just having a handful here. Because when you drive down the street, of course, you see there's still some, I think the mercury vapors are a more white light. But you'll sometimes see as you're driving down the street, you'll see the yellow sodium, and then all of a sudden there's a whiter light. And that sort of random white one here and there may not be as noticeable. You have the same situation here where we've got a few very whitish colored lights in a few areas, and if we start replacing them town-wide, we might get a very different reaction. Which leads me to my next question, or observation, if you will. How does, when we talk about the sodium vapor that we have scattered across the town now, how does that color relate to, say, 4,000 or 6,000 Kelvin? Do you have any idea as to what that roughly is?
I do, and it's on one of our,
Because that may be a better comparison than to say we've got 6,000 Kelvin ones here and we're going to put 4,000 Kelvin ones in. Whatever we have on the streets now in general might be more easily accepted if people don't notice a difference in the change.
that did come up, and we responded to that on the website. Within the frequently asked questions on the website, we do have a response to that. And because I'm looking for it quickly, I won't find it, but what you'll find with the high-pressure sodium, as Heather had mentioned, one is they're very old. So even if I did grab the information that I'm looking for, which I can't find right now, it would actually not even be accurate, because the high-pressure sodium illumination is nowhere near the level that it was spec'd out when it was installed 10 or 12 years ago. It's degraded, and it degrades almost linear. So the lumens that you currently find from high-pressure sodium are poor. They are not adequate for any roadway lighting standards. So that's another reason for some of the change that we've heard, not from Falmouth, but from other communities, is the brightness is because we brought the light back up to what experience people might have seen 10 or 12 years ago. But again, the requirement that we've had for the contractors to bid on would be at the lumen level. The illumination would be equal or slightly less, unless indicated otherwise. But the lumens are very different. In terms of the color temperature, it is very different because you're dealing with an orange glowing light as opposed to a more crisp white light.
So that might be more like 2,000 or 3,000 Kelvin versus the 4,000.
It may not even be that high.
Oh, really? Even
yeah.
lower?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So it doesn't really, I think it wouldn't matter almost what we did, that there's going to be a significant difference between what people are used to seeing now and what we might put into place.
And that's an important message. You will definitely be looking at a wider light throughout. And just to put a plug in for the other aspects of energy efficiency programs, whether it be your decorative lighting or any businesses that might be, listening to this or seeing a difference once the town is fully done, there'll be some private businesses, boatyards, or parking lots that are going to say, my light is looking different now because the town is modernized. They're gotten much better look. So we really encourage those folks to call us. We have incentives that we will work with businesses to get them to switch over to LEDs as well. And the nice thing is, because we have the specs standardized, we can suggest that they might want to consider a light that's very similar to get a consistent look. So there are incentives for businesses. We're focusing just on the municipal-owned roadway lighting, but there are also efficiency program rebates for other lighting as well.
Are we done with questions? Go ahead.
I just wonder if Mr. Galligan would be available next week, or do we, if we're deciding that we're not going to vote on it.
That would be next
Monday?
Monday. I might be on the Vineyard.
We'd have to go to the venue.
Road trip? I know there's some members of the public that would like to offer some comments, so we'll get right to you in just a moment.
Your meeting doesn't start until, no, I actually am in Edgartown for a similar discussion with their board, so I could not do it next Monday. You know, again, we set a date of June 14th to try to assemble all of the cats, you know, herding cats is what we're trying to do here, you know, 19 to 20 participants. I certainly could make the executive call and come back the following week, so you could slip from the 14th to, you know, perhaps the 21st. I need to have the bid package ready to go by July 12th. And, you know, certainly, you know, your inventory isn't going to change from June 14th to June 21st, so I can work with that. But, you know, certainly if you wanted to, you know, take a little bit more time to look at the other lights that are out there, perhaps I can come back the following Monday, if you do meet every Monday.
That would be the,
Agreeable?
yeah, the 17th? Okay, that's good.
Some folks who wanted to speak, would you mind, while some folks come up to the lectern here, unwrapping the package here so that folks can see that? Mr. Finneran and then Ms. Hayward.
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. I think Mr. Murphy made some valid points, and I kind of share his trepidation or whatever. And I also question this one-size-fits-all. I think the 6,000 ones may be good for intersections and places that are high crime or highly traversed by pedestrian traffic. And then he said there's one down in the 3,500 range, which would seem to me would be fit well into a more residential application. And I think that, well, it's my assessment that our purchase should probably be a combination of all of these lights depending on their application. Thanks.
Ms. Hayward?
Nancy Hayward, Precinct 5, and I live at 65 Chase Road. I have been paying for the light at 65 Chase Road since the end about of 1989. In 2000, Falmouth contracted with Republic Electric to service all the Falmouth street lights except the private ones. One of those is the street light at 65 Chase Road. Republic was bought by Siemens. I spoke to someone who said they were JM at Siemens. I'm interested in seeing this light that's not a Cobra and it's not a helmet light. The light fixture that was at 65 Chase Road and was all along the historic district in West Falmouth was this helmet light. It's like a reflector, a curved shape. My light burnt out in the end of November. And what I ended up with, and I've had several conversations, I ended up with a Cobra light there with some kind of a white type, but not white light. I stopped paying for these lights. I believe I made the November payment, and I've been receiving the bills. I have not come before the selectmen or the Energy Committee. I hadn't worked up a concise statement to make about this. But I don't know what number of streetlights are in this inventory that is being taken to replace these lights. Some lights in the West Falmouth Historic District have had Cobra-headed lights put in instead of these helmet lights. And I don't know how many, I have not met another person, and this happened before Peter Boyer, it happened before Heather Harper. I looked up at the library today, and it was Virginia Valley Ayla, Richard Armstrong, and all I can think of is Labossiere,
Ray Labossiere?
yes, who were selectmen in 1999. So I don't know how many of these lights are out there. And I personally like the helmet with a light bulb in it. Now, when I first called about my light being out, some woman on the telephone said, well, it might have to be an LED, and I said, an LED is just fine. I thought they meant an LED light bulb, which I use myself in some places in my house. So, how many lights are going to be replaced? And what kind of a light is it in the historic district? And that's my comment about the lights, and I'm not happy with the light that I have, that I haven't been paying the bill for. I suppose that's going to do something to me. But the town should be getting, if I can't have a helmet with a simple light bulb, I'm not going to pay that bill, and it's going to be added to the town's light bill. Thank you.
Mr. Gallivan, would you like to address some of those questions that we have?
Well, the first,
2588 number.
yeah, your total count is 2,588. Yeah, that's your total streetlights, and those are municipal owned, not private. The presenter did indicate that it's a private light, so I assume that she's receiving a bill from NSTAR for a street light that's referred to as the S1 tariff. So it includes a lease. It does include repair and maintenance. She's paying for that. So, you know, Ms. Haywood should be on the phone. You know, she can call Republic, but they're basically going to say it's not our light to maintain. She should be calling NSTAR to say, I'm paying a bill. I have been paying a bill to you for years. They certainly have made a lot of money on her light and should be willing to maintain it for her. So I would definitely encourage her to call NSTAR. That number is 800-592-2000, and get right through customer service and ask to speak to a supervisor.
800-592-2000.
2000. Right. And NSTAR gives Cape Light Complex number out too for energy efficiency, so we share. But seriously, you know, the utilities, and I'm not trying to bash any folks, but they are not as active in moving forward on technology like we are. I do know that at some point NSTAR may be considering an upgrade to LED technology for private lights, but it's not in the near-term horizon.
Mrs. Haywood's comments actually raise another question. We have a number of lights here that are paid privately because years ago when the town said we can't light every light in town, and so some of them were shut off, and people had the option of contacting NSTAR and then paying for the light if they chose to. How do those lights get replaced? I mean, if they wanted to replace them with these LED lights, is that a possibility?
Currently with NSTAR, it is not.
It is not.
I am aware of National Grid, the electric side of National Grid. They currently have before the Department of Public Utilities a revision to their tariff that would allow for an LED model in an option. And, you know, different utilities proceed at different paces depending upon, you know, what their motivation is. But I think all eyes should be on how National Grid moves in terms of advancing this, because then, you know, hopefully NSTAR will actually follow. But that would also, for private-owned lights that are paying a bill to NSTAR, see an LED model available that the utility supports that also brings a lower price and gets rid of some of these lights that are failed, broken, or frankly should have been replaced a long time ago. The other gentleman that spoke in terms of the different color temperature, that certainly is, you know, something to consider. Whether or not the more active intersections would warrant a 6,000 Kelvin color temperature like you have, and perhaps in a residential neighborhood, the 4,000 or maybe even the 3,500. Again, the Exhibit A is totally your, ability, and you can call that out in an area, you can call it out on a pole-by-pole basis, work with Peter to, identify those for you that may be sensitive or concerned.
The town engineer was planning to be here tonight, but wasn't able to join us. My understanding is that we will be replacing lumens with lumens as well. So currently, the lumens at the intersections are, you might have a 400 lumen lamp at an intersection, but the kelvins may be different. I think Mr. Finneran's point is right on, and we do need to look at that as well. But the light production lumens has already been accounted for. So the kelvins, the light quality needs to be addressed as well.
No, good comments, and I definitely will encourage the board, other members of the public, between now and I'll follow up with some information through your office and get to the board. Look forward to being back on the 17th.
You could bring this to the podium to
Sure.
show. I know they can adjust the cameras, but,
No, that's fine.
so is this one of many possible designs, or is this representative of what we might see, or?
It is what is out there right now, and I'll hold this up this way. From a standpoint of the installation of this, this fixture replaces from the arm, which comes off of your utility pole. So pretty much the responsibility is solely on the fixture. We don't even touch the utility lines, even the arm, it stays intact. So the contractor may propose this light. He may propose something different. Again, you may ask in your Exhibit A that you want to see something equivalent to this. But when I unplug it, I'll be able to show you more of the LEDs. But this fixture is very rugged. It's a housing that is epoxy coated for corrosion resistance and definitely good in the Cape climate. It's quite heavy, and it provides what's referred to as a heat sink. These fins allow the heat to dissipate, as well as some gaps for snow. The other thing is, from a standpoint of the flexibility that these have, I'm going to change some driver settings they refer that can actually allow the light to be adjusted. These are not field adjusted, but it just as a sample to show you, you can in fact, at the time you spec the light, require different illumination levels. This all can be selected at the time of the specification of the product. So I'm going to turn this off, and just to give everybody a look-see at what the makeup of the light is. This is a 30 LED light, which is equivalent to like a 100-watt fixture that you see out here. If you want lower lumens, then you'd only see 20 of these. You can actually custom and tailor these. So each one of these little dots is one LED. So this has a collection of about 30 of them, and they're directionally oriented. So that's the importance of trying to get this correct in terms of making sure that there is shielding. These actually have little rubber bumpers, I call them, that actually have shields built onto them. So if you envision the sidewalk or the homes over here and the arm here, this light is in fact only illuminating from the curb out to the roadway. There is actually no light that migrates onto homes because of these little black bumpers on here. So it's very easy to service. This type allows you through one doorway access to access what's referred to as the driver. There are no ballast with these, so this actually uses a lot less electricity. Your connection points are easily accessible, and the connections to the LEDs are all sealed, so there's no harm from the environment. So we've seen them go in very well. The production rate that we saw in terms of the demonstration project was about 30 of these a day. So from a standpoint of considering the number of lights you have, the crews, once they do get up and running, will be in the community for a few weeks. So that's why, coordinating with DPW folks in terms of the best time to be in town, we'd like to, do that prior to award in the September timeframe. But if anybody wants to, touch it, feel it, I'm happy to show you a little bit more what they look like.
I just had one other question, and I'm wondering if the town manager or someone in the engineering department could figure out what it will actually cost us as well for the details for that, during that installation period?
I'll be happy to explore that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else in the public have any last questions, comments? We're all set here. So potentially bring Mr. Galligan back 2 weeks.
Great, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great. This is a nice job.
All right, next on our agenda is presentation by the Capital Advisory Committee. And we have the presentation on the...
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually going to stand up and go to the podium. Sorry. I had emailed it to Diane. She didn't have it there. I have a copy on my phone. Let's watch technology at work here.
You emailed it to me, can I get into my email through that?
I could do that, or I could just,
I have it on
we
my
could
phone.
sneaker net it, which
Oh.
might be a little bit faster. Give me 1 second here. Let's see, there it is. See if I can do this.
She's usually really good about getting those timed. If we have an adapter, I have it on here.
I'm just trying to figure out how to get it onto here. I
Yeah.
don't know that I've ever done it before.
I actually have it writing, but you can just... I don't believe me, though. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Actually, let me try emailing it.
Then just go on that, on the
Yeah.
laptop.
That might be the easiest thing to do.
Do you want to email it to Jennifer and she can put it on a stick?
So, yeah, I could do that. Let's see.
If it goes through our email system.
Everybody's going to get it.
I have it already. I have it on my phone.
The actual presentation or the,
No, the email that you
report?
sent. The report. I just have the report, not the
That's all I
presentation.
have.
yeah, I just sent the report, so,
She's in her
oh,
office.
she's getting it
Yeah.
now? Okay. While we're waiting for that, why don't we jump ahead real quick and let's do the minutes. So this is our 9:40 item to approve minutes of May 20 and to approve and vote not to release the executive session minutes of May 20. So we'll start with the public session minutes. Are there any comments, changes, questions?
Of May 13th?
Uh,
Which ones?
May
20.
20.
May
I don't know,
20.
I noticed we have May 13 in
Yeah.
our agenda, in our packet, but
But
it's
it's
not on
not.
our
I think
agenda.
that was just for reference for the interview.
Oh, okay. So the minutes of May 20.
I would move to approve the minutes of May 20th.
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the minutes of the public session for May 20. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition, abstentions? All right, unanimous.
An abstention.
One abstention.
And I would also I make a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session of May 20th and not release.
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the executive session minutes of May 20, not to release. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? One abstention. All right. And that dispenses with that item of our agenda. We're not back yet.
Can we do the service center?
Yeah, actually,
waiver?
Ms. Swain is here, so our 9:10 item, discuss and vote request for a waiver of tent fee at Falmouth Service Center.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
If you would mind identifying yourself for the record. We know who you are, obviously, but that doesn't mean the folks at home do.
Okay. Hello, I'm Brenda Swain, Precinct 6, and the Executive Director of Falmouth Service Center, our community's food pantry. And I am here this evening because many of you may understand and know that we have started to do something called a community dinner. They began in October of last year. After several years of many different organizations in the community talking about what was a gap as far as providing food for people who may need it or companionship around meals. And we have a couple different lunch programs. We have Around the Table, and we have the Meals on Wheels that are prepared over at Harborview. But there's never been any evening meal for people who might want that. So after we completed our renovation and have a major kitchen at our facility, we were able to consider the possibility of doing that. So the reason I'm here tonight is because we started these great meals in collaboration with the faith community. The food is prepared at the service center, but we don't serve it there. It's brought to different faith communities to serve. And many different faith communities want to participate, and some of them do not have a hall that's large enough to accommodate the number of people that have been coming. We have anywhere between 150 and 250 people at these meals. So, and the meals are free to any resident, anybody who lives here, who wants to come. Sometimes people put 50 cents in a little bucket, sometimes they put a $20 bill. It's by donation. Nobody has to put anything in the bucket. It's really about being together in the community and getting to know your neighbors, regardless of what your background is. It's been wonderful. So in order to allow some of these other faith communities to participate, during the summer months, we've looked into putting up a tent for us to be able to do it outside on the grounds of those facilities. We did that at St. Barnabas this past month. The Sheriff's Department lets us use their tent for free, and the inmates come and put that tent up. All we need to do is feed them when they're putting the tent up. And I was not aware until we did this that there was a permit fee to put up a tent. since this is a free community dinner and we're providing the food to everybody who lives here, and it's not a fundraiser, any money that's raised at these dinners goes right back into getting food to prepare the next meals. So because of that, I felt that it was all right to ask for a waiver. It's not me, the service center, as a nonprofit saying, because we're nonprofit, we don't want to pay a tent waiver. If we were holding a fundraiser and putting up a tent, that would be a whole different situation. We would pay a fee for that. So I'm asking because it's a community meal for all of us to come together to eat, and we have no costs associated to the tent. So that's why I'm here. And I was going to ask if you could, if you consider this, do it for any time we would need a tent for this purpose, because there's going to be several different faith communities going forward who are interested, and we don't have all of those dates set yet, so I couldn't give you a list of specific dates.
Questions from the board?
No, I make a motion that we provide a fee waiver for the Falmouth Service Center for, what will we call this, community dinners?
Falmouth Eats Together.
Falmouth Eats Together.
And you all should come. You would love it.
I second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion amongst the board? Questions from the audience? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Thank you.
There you go. You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so I believe we're all set now for the
Yes,
Capital
you're all set.
Advisory Committee. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we'll go back to that agenda item. Susan. I think I left my material up there. The board will indulge me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A little odd being on this side. I'm going to take my glasses off. I apologize. I've got a new prescription and I'm still trying to get used to it. My name is Brent Putnam, for the record, member of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen, and I was elected chair of the Capital Advisory Committee, so I'm up here speaking to you this evening. Here with us this evening, in addition to myself, Doug Jones, was also an appointed member of the Capital Advisory Committee, as was, we suppose, in the audience, Dan Shearer, Peter Giacomosi, Jennifer Petit. I think that's everybody. I don't see any other members at this present time. And we were formed by the board last fall. We were asked to meet and to follow the charge to develop some recommendations, and so this is the culmination of that work. Next slide, please. So what we'll go over, and hopefully 10-15-minute presentation is what we're anticipating here. We'll talk about the background, how we got here, the charge that was provided, the methodology, how we came to the recommendations, and then of course we have recommendations and explanations for some policy changes, some revenue ideas, and enforcement is another thing that was an issue. Next slide, please. Before we begin, I would like to recognize again the members of the committee. In addition to myself, Doug, Dan, Peter, and Jennifer, who are here this evening, I apologize. We also have Mr. Suso, Ms. Harper, also participated in this on a regular basis. Mr. Droulette's not here this evening. He's a member of the Finance Committee who was appointed. And at the top of the list, special recognition for Mr. Zebrich, who passed away partway through our work. While he was with us, Zeb was a very active participant and provided a lot of good feedback, a lot of great ideas, and he was missed throughout the process. Next slide, please. This is the charge. I'm not going to read this. It's a lot of words, and it's government speak. Translated, the next slide, please. We were basically asked to figure out how to fund capital projects. The committee had a task before us. I think if you could go to the next slide. This goes to our methodology. A little bit of background that we were asked to basically come up with some revenue ideas, essentially, some ways, how can we fund capital projects? The committee broke it down and looked at it. There was a prior capital advisory committee that was sponsored, put together by the finance committee itself, and they had already done a considerable amount of work, and so we decided not to redo what they did, but to build upon it. One of the things that they did was to categorize capital projects into three groups. Category 1, Category 2, Category 3. Category 1 were those items that fell below $25,000 and had 5-year limits on them. Category 2 or 5-year lifetime. So, for example, it might be a car that you might buy for $20,000, might be good for 5 years. That was a Category 1 item. Category 2 item were expenditures between $25,000 and $1 million with a life expectancy greater than 5 years, which might be, say, a roof that you have to put on town hall, might cost you $100,000 and is expected to last 20 years. And then Category 3 with the very large expenditures exceeding $1 million with a life expectancy greater than 10 years. Those are projects that, for the most part, stand on their own. Things such as the override that the town voted for recently for funding and design for a new water treatment plant. Category 1 can be incorporated into the budget. They're small, they're relatively easy to do. Category 3 are big enough that they can stand on their own. Category 2 is what we decided to focus on because of the fact that they really didn't fit into either category, and it's where in the past there have been issues funding those Category 2 projects. So the methodology, the first item on our methodology, how we came to where we are today, was to focus on the Category 2 needs. The other thing is we decided to leave the prioritization of the capital needs to the experts. The Finance Committee's Capital Advisory Committee did a certain degree of prioritization, but what we found was that, first of all, we acknowledge that the board determines spending priorities through its policies. And there are also, of course, the town management and the department heads are experts in what they do. And they are better suited to say, listen, we need this project before this project because, say, the roof is leaking now, we need to do that before we go out and put an addition on the building. They're the ones who are going to have a better feel based on the board's policies and direction as to how things should be spent. We decided we would brainstorm, obviously, potential revenue sources, measures to save money, but we did focus on revenue. And the reason why is because the assumption was that cost-saving measures have probably already been done. Town management and department heads have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they can save money. And in fact, in the past year, I believe the department heads turned back over $1 million from their budgets back into the town budget, which demonstrates the fact that they understand, they know how to save money and where they can cut corners and still provide the services. So we decided to focus on the revenue. One of the other things too is that the committee really didn't have the kind of expertise to dig in deep in terms of cost savings, and we just had a presentation from the Cape Light Compact, which is a perfect example. We don't have the expertise to go out and say, you know what, all those street lights, we can replace those and we know exactly how to do it and exactly what it's going to cost. That requires a certain degree of expertise that this committee didn't have. We invited department heads, recognizing that there are some town departments that do generate revenue in excess of their expenses. The beach is a perfect example. They bring in a lot of money for the parking passes that are sold for the beaches, and we don't put nearly as much money into the beaches as we get out of them. And then finally, we looked at the financial policies of the Board of Selectmen to see if we could offer any recommendations. Next slide, please. So these recommendations were largely brought to us by Jennifer Petit, and we thank her for her efforts in this whole process. We were not as familiar with policy and how some of this should play out. This was very helpful to us and hopefully will be very helpful to the board at large. In November, free cash is usually certified in the fall, so in November, capital plan is funded using the available free cash. In the spring, funds would be transferred into the capital stabilization fund, and this is where a lot of the work that we're doing comes into play, as well as the prior funds that have been allocated from, say, the meals tax. That gets allocated in the spring, put into the capital stabilization fund. And then what will happen is in November, there'll be a draw out of that. Annually, town management will recommend to the Category 2 spending what it is that they think would come out of the capital stabilization fund in that $25,000 to $1 million range. And then finally, that the revenues that we're recommending here are specifically earmarked for the capital stabilization fund, just as we have, for example, with the meals tax, that we've said we're going to dedicate those funds to capital. Next slide, please. So existing sources that we have now, we've talked about free cash. That fluctuates. The meals tax, of course, fluctuates, but it's been a larger pool of money. It was a wise decision on the part of the board. And of course, this year the board decided to set aside 1/4 of 1% of the annual operating budget to help fund the capital needs. But quite frankly, and we all know, it's not enough. There are a lot more, there's a lot more money required to fund these needs than revenue that we're generating. Next slide, please. So we'll get to the revenue recommendations here. Through the committee's discussions, parking is one of the things that actually came up over and over and over again. The town has a huge amount of parking, and of course we know that through the beach stickers. Oftentimes we talk about opening the beaches. We're not really opening the beaches, we're opening the parking lots at the beaches. We're not selling access to the beaches. Anybody can walk to any beach and it's free. What we're selling is a parking space at the beach. It's a huge asset that the town has. Everywhere there's a beach, there's a parking lot. Everywhere there's a parking lot, there's revenue that's being generated. But the town also has a huge underutilized parking lot, and it's right here on Main Street. Meters were a fixture on Main Street until the revitalization, and it could be argued that Main Street was revitalized in part because we removed the meters. But of course there was some controversy to that the meters were removed without public hearings or a lot of public discussion. Things have changed, obviously. At this point in time, there's a huge amount of pressure on public parking in the downtown area. The start of summer means we have almost weekly events, sometimes daily events. We have artists' fairs, we have the, sorry, I'm having a brain cramp now. The farmer's market. We have events on the library lawn. Over and over and over again, oftentimes several times a week, there are huge events that are held in the downtown area, and this puts a huge amount of pressure on the parking in the downtown area, such that we've even heard from employees here in Town Hall that there are days when they can't even go to lunch, or even when they come into work, they have trouble finding parking spaces here because there's so much demand for parking in the downtown area. What we're suggesting is that we meter the downtown area, that we put meters back on Main Street, put meters back around Town Hall Square, and even on the parking lot that extends behind Main Street along Catherine Lee Bates Road. There are approximately 500 spaces in the downtown area, and we're conservatively estimating about $500,000 a year is possible here. And this is based on the revenues that we currently get from the Woods Hole parking meters. In fact, town-wide, there's a potential here of as much as $1 million a year in parking fees. Concerns, there may be some concerns about having access to parking on Main Street when the meters are in effect. One of the things that we noted is that the Mullen Hall School obviously won't have meters in the summertime. If someone wants to park free in the Main Street area, in the downtown area, the Mullen Hall School is largely unused. It's a large parking lot, and in fact it often does serve as an overflow, if you will. A lot of people will park there, especially, for example, Memorial Day, when the services, people are parking, they end up parking in that area as well because there's just not enough spaces in the downtown area. It's also worth noting that the modern parking meters, we wouldn't have to put the traditional coin-operated meters at every space. Modern meters are generally units that will cover a bank of parking spaces. You walk up to it, you can insert a coin, you can insert a dollar, you can insert a credit card, and it will give you a slip that you stick on your dashboard, and as the meter person comes along and checks, they can see that you have a current sticker or a current thing in your dash. The neat thing about these units is that you can change it according to hours of day, about the season. So for example, we might charge a little bit more between July 4th and Labor Day. We might charge a little bit less during the shoulder seasons, and we might not charge anything at all during the winter time, based again on supply and demand. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. We also don't need to purchase the meters. What the committee came to discover is that there are a lot of communities, and Plymouth, for example, is one of them, that use private companies. They issue an RFP. These companies come in, say, here's the bid, we'll handle your parking for you. This is how much money you want to get, all right? This is what we can do for you. And they give us a complete rundown as to how the meters are going to go into place, how much it's going to cost, how much revenue the town might get based on the number of meters. And so the first recommendation that we're making is to meter the parking again in the downtown area and to issue an RFP for the entire town, including Woods Hole, downtown, the Heights, and let's see what can be done for us. Along the lines with that as well, we started talking about parking permits. And again, we talked about, I just mentioned the beach permits a few moments ago. The dump permit, the waste management facility has been one of those things where we've had a decline in revenue because of a lack of use, if you will, the change in the fee structure up there. So the other recommendation that we're going to make is that the super sticker be brought back, because there's definitely value to be had if we have metered parking in the Main Street area. A super sticker where someone could have parking for Main Street area, parking for Woods Hole, parking at the beaches, access to the dump, it adds value. And folks may be very willing to buy a quote-unquote super sticker that gives them the ability to go to any parking in town for one fee, to access the dump for that one fee, and will probably help make some revenue there. The other aspect of the super sticker is that rather than making it one sticker, because it has in the past, you get a super sticker, you get one sticker. Well, the only problem with the super sticker is that, especially if you're going to use it for a permit parking on Main Street, when you're walking along to check the parking, that's usually on the passenger side. If you're checking parking at the beach, it's going to be on the driver's side. If you're going to the dump, it's going to be on the driver's side. So putting the sticker in different places, we said, listen, if you're going to bring the super sticker back, as we recommend, make it a super sticker in name only, so that someone would get a super sticker and it would essentially be a pass to the dump, beach parking, and street parking. And they could put those three stickers on any three vehicles that they want, because let's face it, you're going to take your pickup truck to the dump, but you're probably going to ferry the kids in the sedan. It usually doesn't make a lot of sense to have one sticker on one vehicle when you're not necessarily going to use the same vehicle for all of these different trips. That kind of flexibility, again, may attract people to purchasing the super stickers and helping generate revenue. Rental inspections. Town meeting recently gave the board the authority to set fees for rental properties for not for the the bed and breakfasts, the hotels and motels. That's already covered. There was in the town bylaw a $25 annual fee for homes that are rented on a seasonal basis, on say a weekly basis. That aspect of the bylaw was removed so that the board had some discretion to go ahead and implement this on its own. We're recommending that this be done because there is the possibility here of up to $1 million in revenue. Now that sounds like a great, huge number, but let's temper that a little bit. In your report, and I have to recommend that you read the report, it's a long one, there's 18 pages here. There's a lot more detail in there. It's very difficult to present all of this detail in a few slides in a 15-minute presentation, and I may already be over time for all I know. For a bed and breakfast in the town of Falmouth, a 3-bedroom bed and breakfast is going to pay a license fee, a health department inspection, a building inspection, a fire department inspection, a fire alarm test, and a fire extinguisher inspection. All of these added together approximately $500. That's where we get the $1 million from. There are approximately 2,000 homes in the town of Falmouth that are rented on a weekly basis. $500 in inspection fees per house brings us to roughly $1 million. Now, we say we have to temper that a little bit because we may need to increase some staff in order to make that work. Adding 2,000 inspections to the fire department's workload is going to create a lot of work for them, obviously. We may not get $1 million out of this. We may have to add staff. We may have to add shifts. These are considerations that the board has to take as it juggles all of these recommendations and these ideas. But there's a potential of several $100,000, if not more, in revenue from including these in there. The room taxes, this has been discussed before, and the Capital Advisory Committee, we acknowledge that there's a 2%, there's a 2% there that we have not actually gone after yet, or we have, but it's been rejected. As you know, the town has a 4% lodging tax on all bed and breakfasts, hotels, motels. The state has allowed us to increase that another 2% to 6%. That has come before this board in the past. It has come before town meeting in the past. It has been rejected every time. We mention it here in part because it's still money on the table that is a potential revenue source. The $400,000 to $600,000 is not that alone, though. There's a potential of about $400,000 for that 2%. It's been estimated that $400,000 to $600,000 could be generated if the state would allow us to tax those home rentals the same way we tax the bed and breakfasts, the hotels, the motels. We could potentially make $400,000 to $600,000 in room taxes if we were allowed to do that. Of course, we have that. We've presented it. It's, I believe it was part of the governor's budget to allow us to do that. I don't think it passed muster. But we should continue to press for it. Because, and there's an important aspect here, these room taxes for the homes. Right now, the state charges 5.7% rooms tax on formal bed and breakfast, hotels, motels. We charge 4%, it's 9.7%. If you're renting a house to someone for a week, instead of staying in one of these formal lodging facilities, you're getting a 9.7% discount. Now, for the folks who stay in these houses, that's a sizable discount over the course of a week, and it's money saved. But it also affects those bed and breakfasts. It means that people who might be going after a discount are not staying in the bed and breakfasts. They're not staying in the hotels. They're not staying in the motels. And we've seen the effect that that has on those businesses in town. A lot of buildings, there are a lot of condos, there are a lot of timeshares that used to be hotels, that used to be motels. We have bed and breakfasts that are no longer, because it's difficult to run a business when you're competing with people who already have a 10% discount over what you're offering. And so if for no other reason, there's an equity issue there. Because the biggest thing too is that if we don't do something about this, and that's where the rental inspections and the room taxes, going after the state, trying to get those houses taxed the way we tax bed and breakfasts and hotels and motels, we may lose what we already get right now in the lodging revenue. Because if more B&Bs go under, if more hotels get converted into condominiums or timeshares, that revenue gets lost. So there's an equity issue there, but it also affects the town of Falmouth. Next slide, please. One of the few savings that was a no-brainer for us was the renting of town offices. Town council and the human services departments together, there's about $50,000 a year in rent that we pay somebody else to house town departments. If we could move those departments into town buildings, we would have a savings of $50,000. It was one of the easy no-brainers that we came up with. Marine fees, this is in two pieces. In this section here, we have mooring rentals, registration, and yacht clubs. There's been a lot of talk in years past about changing the way the moorings are allocated in the town of Falmouth. One of the ideas that was presented to us by the harbor master is the idea, and I use the term renting, although it's really a short-term allocation, if you will, temporary reassignment. Right now, and I'll use myself as an example, I have a boat. For a couple of years, my boat was not in the water because I was doing renovations on it. So my mooring was being unused, but I was complying with the letter of the law, or the policy that the board has, which is that any mooring that's assigned to someone in the town of Falmouth must have a registered boat assigned to it. My boat was registered, it just wasn't in the water. Well, there are a lot of moorings like that, and I can go up and down various waterways. I've been up and down various waterways, and I can tell you that there are moorings which haven't had a boat on it in 5 or 6 years. But somebody probably has a boat in their yard that they've registered with the state that is assigned to that mooring. They're just not using the mooring on it on an annual basis. The harbor master suggested that someone who's in this predicament, we know that, okay, I'm not going to get my boat in the water this year. So call up the harbor master, say, you know what, I've got a free mooring available. The harbor master can then, for that season, reassign that mooring to somebody else on a 1-year term. That conservative estimate is about $42,000 in revenue. Again, it may be tempered here because there might be some additional work required by the harbor master's office, but there's some revenue there. Plus, it addresses concerns about how the moorings are allocated. It means that folks who are on the waiting lists have the opportunity to get a mooring, and maybe it's going to be a different mooring every year because maybe there's a mooring available in this harbor this year and in this harbor next year. But it gives these people access to mooring where they might not have it for 10 years because that's the length of the waiting lists in some of our harbors. Registering boats in Falmouth was another issue raised or question raised, that when a boat is registered in the town, and that reminds me, let me jump back to the super sticker real quick. I forgot to mention this. Falmouth garaged vehicles. The excise tax that we get for vehicles comes from vehicles that are registered, that are principally garaged in the town of Falmouth. Someone owns a home here and they own a home somewhere else in Massachusetts. They may have their car principally garaged somewhere else. That means that other community is getting the income from that excise tax. So one of the recommendations, and it's in our report, is that the super sticker only sold to those people who have their cars principally garaged in Falmouth. We can be assured of that revenue, not just from the super sticker then, but from the excise tax. And it might encourage some of these folks who have dual residences to garage their car in Falmouth, and now we're getting a little bit more excise tax. So we could jump ahead to the next slide. Same thing for registering boats. The town where your boat is registered is the town that you're paying excise tax to. If we say that, as a policy, the board could say that we're going to allow moorings only for people who register their boats in the town of Falmouth. They don't have to live in the town of Falmouth, but we're going to require that they register their boat as being in Falmouth, and then we get the excise tax for that. The final thing in this section is yacht clubs are right now treated differently than boat yards, and yet they do the same thing. They have essentially commercial moorings. They rent those moorings out. They pay $175 a year for the mooring, and they may lease it out to someone for $1,000 or more per season. The town is losing some of that revenue, and by treating yacht clubs as boat yards, we're getting the same rate from both, and they're essentially doing the same thing. They're just turning over that product. It's our mooring, but we're leasing it to a boat yard or we're leasing it to a yacht club, and they're turning around and handing it out to somebody for a higher fee. Next slide, please. So the first section, we've got this broken into 2 sections. The first section are things that the board probably needs to set in motion now in order to start moving on them later. For example, the idea of renting moorings or reassigning them on an annual basis if somebody's not using them. That's going to take some effort. In here, we're recommending that the board approve that. It would take some time to ramp it up. There would probably be a pilot program beginning in one harbor next year. That's how long it's going to take the harbor master to get his information and his process together. So the first group of these revenue options are going to take some effort and some lead time on the part of the board to get started now if we hope to implement them, say, next year. These are things that can be done right away, this section. And that's why we have the marine fees in 2 sections, because this fall, of course, the board sets policy, or sets fees, excuse me, regarding various items. And some of those things are slip fees and commercial moorings. Slip fees, right now, the town of Falmouth undercuts the boat yards by a significant amount. We charge $152 to $175 per foot. The boat yards charge $215 to $260 per foot. We are estimating that if we bring it up to about 80 to 90% of what the marinas charge, we'll get an additional $55,000 to $180,000. The good thing about this is that the marina is not associated with the Waterways Fund. As you know, mooring fees have to go towards the Waterways Fund exclusively. The slips in the marina are not so constrained, so we could use the money from that. That could go, for example, to things like beach nourishment. It doesn't have to be directly associated with waterways projects, although beach nourishment might actually be considered a waterways project. Commercial moorings, again, the commercial entities, the marinas, there are approximately 235 moorings that are leased to commercial boat yards for $175 per mooring, and they typically rent them for $1,000 or more a season, sometimes for that much a week at the height of the season. They're making a lot of money off of this, and it can't be said enough, where the town should not be in the business of subsidizing businesses. And yet that's essentially what we're doing here. We're losing revenue because these businesses are selling it for considerable markup over what it is that we are giving it to them for. You'll see there's no recommendation here for increasing the fees on public moorings, and the reason why is because we're not trying to make it more expensive for people to access the water. There are the ramps, there are the moorings. Let's face it, if you have a slip, you've got a pretty big boat probably, and you've got a lot of money to pay the slip fees. I know, I have a boat, and I'll tell you right off the bat, there are very few people who make a living on the water. Most of those boats out there are an optional extra. It's a hobby for most of us. And if you've got the money for the hobby, if you don't have the money for the slip fees, the stark reality is that there's 160 people on the waiting list for that. And if there are a few people who don't want to pay a higher slip fee at the Falmouth Marina, there are people waiting in line who are probably willing to do it. We're recommending that we increase the commercial mooring fee from $175 to $300 this year, and perhaps increasing further in subsequent years. We didn't want to recommend a huge increase in 1 year because obviously we want these boat yards and yacht clubs to understand that it's going to go up. But again, these are recommendations being made to the board. Auction, sell unused town property. There's a question mark here. We really don't know how much there is in value, but there are a lot of unused or underutilized town parcels. Two that we mention in here, there's the Augusta parcel in T-Ticket that was purchased a number of years ago, ostensibly for a packaged sewer plant for the T-Ticket area. Well, obviously we're not moving in the direction of packaged plants anymore, so there's a parcel there that might potentially be resold. As one town meeting member told me, he said, if we need it, we should keep it, but if we don't need it, then we should sell it. And annually, the board and the town management should review our inventory of properties to determine if there's anything in there that can be sold. Annual alarm registration, this was one that showed up late in the game. We had a discussion with the chief of police and realized that there is an annual alarm registration. Actually, it's not even an annual registration. There's a $25 fee if you have an alarm in your house. You're supposed to register with the police department, $25. Very few people actually do it. More importantly, it's a one-time fee, so you might have registered the alarm 10 years ago. Well, if 10 years ago the house changed hands, your phone number changed, maybe the alarm company's changed. The problem with that one-time fee is that when things change, the police department doesn't always know. So what they've actually expressed in the meetings that we had with them was that they don't always have the crucial information for a homeowner. So they might get an alarm, but they don't know who to call. They arrive at the house and they don't know who to call and say, is there a problem here or is this a false alarm? Or, interestingly enough, because we have updated in recent years, you might recall the fees for false alarms, they might not know where to send the false alarm because they don't have a current mailing address. Barnstable has an annual $25 registration fee if you have a home alarm. They make approximately $126,000 a year doing that. And again, it's not something where we're just sticking it to the homeowners. There's a fee for a service here. What the homeowner is going to get out of this is a guarantee that the police know how to get a hold of them. And what we're going to get out of this is if there is a false alarm, and a false alarm, and a false alarm, we know where to send the bill. Water rates, enterprise fund. This was discussed, one of the things that was discussed was increasing the water rates. In fact, what we've found, and the board may already know, is that the water rates are really where they should be. They cover the cost of the operations and the maintenance of the water system quite well. The problem is that it's been subsidizing the general budget. So some of the things like, for example, the water meters that we've talked about having to replace because they wear out over time. Well, instead of replacing water meters, that money's been going back into the general fund and simply subsidizing the operating budget. In this respect, town management should be commended because with this year's budget and plans for future budgets, they've started building into the budget the water meters, the main repairs. They're starting to build these back into the budget. And at the rate we're going in, say, 3 to 5 years, there's the potential that all of that subsidy will be out of the budget, and that we could at that point look at having an enterprise fund. And the idea of the enterprise fund, remember we're talking about capital projects, the things between $25,000 and $1 million. Well, remember town meeting a year or so ago, we had some folks down here who petitioned town meeting to have their water main replaced because it was giving them poor water quality. Well, that's where this should be going, and that's one of the ideas behind an enterprise fund, is that the money is already being set aside from the water rates in order to fund things like water main repairs, things like replacing the water meters. That's a possibility in the future as long as we continue down the path that we're going. But there's no recommendation here to increase water rates because it's doing the job. Next slide, please. So we're getting near the end. There's just a couple of other things here. Honorable mentions. We have in here the complete list of recommendations that the committee came up with. Everybody was asked to brainstorm. Other people came in. For example, we had Carl Cavosa, for example, came in and presented a proposal suggesting that we lease the operation of the Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station because the town now has an agreement with the Bourne Dump that there's now questions as to what are we going to do with the transfer station. A lot of suggestions were brought in, and there's several pages of them in the appendix. They're worth looking at. These recommendations that we offer here tonight were the ones that we thought would provide the most bang for the buck and would be the most easily implemented. But there are a lot more recommendations there in the appendix. The other thing that came up was the issue of enforcement. And again, we talk about the false alarm fee. We've upgraded the fee structure for false alarms, so when the police arrive at a house over and over and over again, and it's because the cat keeps setting off the alarm, we have a means of collecting the cost associated with those false alarms, but we're not really doing it. So enforcement is an issue here. Dumpsters are another thing. The fire department issues permits for dumpsters. The purpose here is because a dumpster sited too close to a home, if it catches on fire, it creates a hazard to the home. So there's a reason for it. You apply for a dumpster permit, they make sure that it's properly sited on the property, and you get the permit for it. A lot of folks don't know that you have to have a dumpster permit, and so those permit fees don't get collected. Enforcement's an issue, and it's something that the board has to consider, that we may have to look at what it costs to enforce these things. And we've actually explicitly stated here in the report that fees that cannot adequately or that cannot be adequately or properly enforced should be revised or eliminated. Next slide, please. So, some thoughts. We're at the end of the presentation here, and I apologize if it's taken a little bit longer than I anticipated. Read the report. There's a lot of information here. There's all of the justification for the recommendations we've provided are in here. You really need to read the report. It's not enough for me to stand here and explain this to you for 15 or 20 minutes or so. it's going to require some decisions on the part of the board. There's no white knight, there's no magic bullet, nobody's going to come in on high-o silver and say, hey, I've got a solution here to all your financial problems. One of the things that we did, we asked the town manager to check in with other communities throughout the state to see if, how did they handle these problems? And guess what, folks? The same way we're looking at handling them here. Cutting expenses, increasing revenues, looking at ways of juggling the budget. There's no white knight, there's no magic solution here. It's going to require decisions, maybe some hard decisions on the part of the board. The committee has expressed an interest or a willingness to come back, and perhaps this is a workshop that the board holds in the next few months to sit down and explore and discuss these ideas in greater depth, perhaps bring in the finance committee as a whole and talk about what possibilities here, what recommendations here the board likes. Maybe there's something in the appendix, and again, like I said, there's page after page of recommendations here. And so with that, I would like to provide you an article here that talks about the current technology and the options in terms of parking meters. Again, this was our #1 recommendation. Next slide, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them, whether it's myself, Mr. Jones, or the other members of the committee. It's a lot to digest.
Well, I don't have any questions. I think you've done a really very thorough job. I could only come up with a couple of other things that I thought that that weren't on your list, but what it would seem to me like your suggestion of doing a workshop, I think you ought to break it down into its similar parts, and then bring them back to the board and have us deal with them on that basis, because you can't do it all at one time. But those that kind of go together, the marine things or the parking or things related to the beaches, something like that, and or to B&Bs and motels and vacation rentals and that sort of thing, and then other things that deal with inspections, something like that. And then over a period of maybe 6 or 8 weeks, we could go through all of it if we took it in sections and discussed it. That's my suggestion.
And I agree that I think each individual issue, rather than bring all of the issues up at one time, would require their own little public hearing or for us to talk through. And it doesn't appear that we'd have that magic bullet as we all had hoped we could find. So I think the reality would also be that we know that we have some capital needs. Those capital needs are unmet, and our infrastructure continues to deteriorate. So we might need to also look at the fact that, in reality, we might have to find another way to meet those capital needs. Blending, meaning some savings like this, some incremental revenues, but without using that dirty word, override is still on the table as well in some form or fashion. Maybe not quite as large as we originally had thought, but maybe something a little bit more.
And that is in the list, in the appendix, and that was one of the things that we said when we started our brainstorming sessions. We said everything is on the table, including the potential of an override, because ultimately, like you say, like we've said over and over again, there's no magic bullet here, and there's going to have to be some decisions made. And if folks don't want to have metered parking on Main Street, we've got to come up with some way of funding these projects. The roof is going to leak someday, and if we don't have the money to fix it, we're going to be in trouble.
I just want to make 2 other comments. I think when you think about parking meters, you also have to think about parking management. And it's a question of which comes first, the management or the meters. I mean, you put the meters in and then try to manage them, or do you look at what your parking issues are and then how you might manage those, and would meters be helpful to that, as opposed to just looking at them as a revenue? I happened to be at a Yarmouth Board of Selectmen meeting one night, and the town manager had asked town employees to brainstorm about ways in which the town could increase some of its revenue. And I don't know exactly how many beaches Yarmouth has, but I was there for the presentation that 3 employees made regarding beaches and concessions. Now, we have 13 beaches, 15? I think it's 13. And 2 of them have concessions, Surf Drive and All Silver. But what these young people did, and they were young, believe me, they were young employees, I don't even know what departments they worked in, but they looked at all the beaches and they looked at all the types of concessions, the things that people like when they're at a beach, what they need, what they like to eat, the hat, the sunglasses, the kids with toys and all this sort of thing. And so they looked at the beaches to see where they could carve out space for a vendor at the different beaches and how many vendors. And then what they were suggesting was that the town go into like a lease agreement with, you'd have to put it out to bid, obviously, but you put it out to bid, go into lease agreements for certain kinds of vendors. They could come in with their trucks or their wagons or whatever, and rent those spaces for the season, and then the town gets the rent, but they also get a percentage of what they sell. And they had, huh?
We do that now.
In 2
We do
places.
that. No,
Not
we
at
have-
every
we
beach.
give, yeah, we do. And we bid out other beaches, if I'm not mistaken, with ice cream trucks and things
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
no, well, no, but I'm saying that you look at all of the beaches in town and look at, but anyway, I'm just throwing that out as something that you could think about, because the projected revenues from that, just in Yarmouth, were rather significant.
Any
So-
other comments or questions from the board?
I'd just like to say, I think you guys.
Yeah, great job, yeah.
Did a great job. I mean,
Really did.
I mean, you had whole nights devoted to specific departments, to specific issues, and at least it gives us a base to work on, and I thank both of you for representing the board. I think you did a great job,
Not
as
just
well
us,
as everybody else.
The whole
Yeah.
committee, and you know what, because of the events of the past year with like the wind turbines and some of these other controversial issues, the charge, we were asked to come back before town meeting in April, but of course, because of that as a significant issue, we asked the board if we could come in afterwards, just in part so that this didn't get overshadowed by the events surrounding town meeting and the election. But from our start in November through pretty much the completion of our work in April, a fantastic group of people stepped up. We met almost every week and really put together a very aggressive schedule, and they did a fantastic job in helping out and putting this all together. So I'm standing here talking, but by no means was this my work alone. I can't say enough about the members of the committee, and again, we lost a huge resource with Zeb Bridges passing, so.
And your appendix has a huge number of items too. It's like 80-some or 90-some
I think it's
additional.
over 100.
Is it over 100? I thought it was great. I thought you really did a good job. I agree with Kevin. It was very, very thorough and very well put together.
101.
101.
Any members of the committee want to add anything? Did I forget anything? I guess I didn't. If members of the public, any questions, comments? Thank you all.
Okay. Let's
By all means, Dan. I'll resume my traditional role
I
here.
think the volunteers did extremely good job.
Dan, could you identify yourself for the
Dan
record, please?
Sheriff,
Thank you.
Precinct 6. But I'd like to also say our town manager, our assistant town manager, and our new director of finance spent an awful lot of time on this, answered questions, and worked very hard with us. And I have not seen that on any other committee that I've worked on. And I'd like to thank them very much for their help.
And I'd like to also add that the responsiveness of the different department heads who came in, sometimes with very short notice, and gave us reports as to what their departments were doing, made our work much, much easier and able to work more efficiently because we could get that information quickly.
And coming back over and over, in some cases when we had identified something, for example, with the parking, we brought the chief of police back several times to discuss parking, and like the alarm registration and so on came up, and very, very helpful coming in and on, again, not just on short notice, but repeatedly and assisting us with this. All right. Well, with that, I think we can move on to our next agenda item. Thank you, folks, for coming. And we have discuss and vote revisions to fee waiver policy. You all should have this in your packet. Is everyone comfortable with the revisions that are here? If not, we can always bring this back for a vote at a later time. Mr. Murphy?
I'm comfortable with the revisions, and I think what the revisions provide is some more clear direction versus the way the policy was previously written. The way the policy was previously written, everyone came back before the Board of Selectmen and tried to appeal to our hearts versus the reality of the policy. And it provides just a cut and dry scenario that if there's public benefits and things of that nature, that'll be made on the management level. And that's what we hired the town manager for. I think we made a great attempt to originally come out with a fee, policy, but I think the waiver aspect just provides a little bit more cut and dry on how it's going to be handled.
Did I read into this that maybe all of the approvals will be done by the town manager?
That's how I see it.
Rather than by the selectmen? I mean, that's the way it read to me, that we wouldn't be doing any approvals anymore, and then the town manager's office would, and would also then grant waivers where appropriate.
Well, I don't know that we've established a policy, but certainly we could do that.
I think that would be a great thing to do.
I tend to agree with you on that one.
I think this is more the waiver aspect
Yeah.
tonight we're dealing with, but it's something to discussion. I'm sure there's some large events that folks would want to air out before this board, meaning road races, things of that nature, but.
Well, major changes maybe,
Yeah.
but
That and, oftentimes we'll have things, for example, on the summary of actions, you look at what we had tonight, and most of these are repeats, that things that have been
Yeah.
approved in the past, and they're simply coming back, it's the same thing next year. And certainly, if we were to start delegating these sorts of things, maybe the initial request, the initial approval would come before the board, and then if they were simply coming back to do the same thing that they did last year, that it would go to the town manager then. If there's no changes, if there's no significant alterations to what they had originally done, it would be approved by the town manager's office.
I think we can go the route of it being administrative approval, and if the town manager wanted,
Yeah.
support,
Could
he
bring
could say,
it to the
all right,
board."
that's when I feel I'll
Yeah.
bring to the board, but to say, if he doesn't feel that there's a question mark, go ahead and approve it.
But I didn't read it into tonight in the
No.
fee waiver aspect,
No.
but I think it's a good idea,
No.
maybe had to work that up.
Again,
I don't
the
disagree
general-
with it.
Yeah, well, the other thing probably we would have to do would be the liquor licenses, the one-day liquor licenses, but that's it. And all the rest could be done, and then,
Beach weddings, we've set up a policy
Yeah.
for how the weddings are supposed to be run. In other words, how the permits are supposed to be issued. And I don't have a problem with that. I think they need to put that together. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
okay, go
I just would recommend that you make two additions based on the discussion. Under the general fee waiver policy, there should be just a note that says prior approval by the Board of Selectmen. That way, something like tonight's community dinner doesn't necessarily fall in any of these categories, but the board has already approved it, so you could just have prior approval by the Board of Selectmen there. And the same thing on the second page, you'd have a 1, 2, and a 3, prior approval by the Board of Selectmen. So if there's an item that comes up that doesn't necessarily fall into these categories, but the board has approved, that gives us the guidance that we need, that we don't need to come back and see you on it.
right, okay, that works for me.
I
think
would
that's
just
good.
add on that, I think that probably all of the investigation about any permits is already done before it comes to the Board of Selectmen. So I think that they could make the recommendation if they've done all the investigating on it. So it isn't as if this board does the investigation on any permit.
True.
So the work has been done before it is sitting here.
Comes here,
So
yeah.
I think it could continue to stay that it doesn't need to come to the selectmen.
And I agree with you, but I'm looking ahead, but I don't think that's on the agenda tonight to vote that.
No.
So can I make a motion that we approve the update of the fee waiver policy with the additional 2 changes with the prior approval of the Board of, with the, or prior approval of the Board of Selectmen on those 2 specific areas?
Second.
So a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Are we all clear as to what we're going to be voting the policy with the additions as suggested by Ms. Harper? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
But then the next piece, they'll come back
Unanimous.
with a different,
Okay.
with a different policy.
Well, then you know my opinion ahead of time.
All right. And next item on our agenda is to interview, vote, and appoint constable. I do have a question. I apologize. I did not have a chance to ask this previously of town management, but I know our policy limits the number of constables that we have. Do we know at this time how many constables we have currently appointed and how many vacancies we have?
Just as the chairman preparing this, we do not have an actual written policy on the number of constables at this time. They searched everywhere
Really?
to find what, if we ever actually, I wasn't part of the board, they searched everywhere the office to find if there was an actual number of constables that the town had. I do know that we have some constables that are currently on the rolls that are aging and don't want to do some of the work that typically may be part of the entire job, but
I do remember we did vote a number, and it was probably before you came back on the board, yeah.
But I asked them to research that.
And it'd probably be in the minutes.
Right, and they went through all of those minutes.
They did?
And you know what? That's
I would-
exactly it. We have the policy, but it says that the board shall set that number, and we did set that number. I do remember us taking that
Wasn't
vote.
it like 5, 4,
Yeah,
something like
it was
that?
something in that range, but
Yeah.
I cannot remember off the top of my head. It should be in the minutes somewhere, yeah.
They
Well, I
did
remember Ahmed was on the board because he
Yes.
made the motion.
Yeah. All right, well, you know what, we can do the interviews this evening, and perhaps we should probably try to give one more try now that we know when that, or at least we have some ideas to when the vote was taken and how it was
I
established.
should find it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'll remember it.
Then perhaps we hold off on making any appointments this evening until we know for sure what we have for vacancies. All right, and so with that, and I apologize for keeping you gentlemen. We have 2 gentlemen this evening who are interviewing for constable.
Yep.
Mr. Braga, you're first on the list.
Thank you.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Ron Braga. Put my glasses on. Probably a bunch of baseball coaches out there watching saying, we tell them he can't see. Being an umpire, of course. I'm sure you have some questions.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be a constable for the town of Falmouth?
Approximately 6 years ago, I got licensed with a security business through the Massachusetts State Police. And on several occasions, I've been called in to protect properties during people getting evicted while their furniture's being moved out and the like. And so I got to learn a little bit about the process. And unfortunately, about 8 or 9 months ago, I had to evict someone out of my house. And Constable Tommy Zines, who's authorized by this board to work in Falmouth, took care of that for me. And we had discussed about me working with him, as a couple of other constables that you have in Falmouth work together, and I thought it was a good idea, and so here I am. So I do have some experience in the eviction process, and I will, if appointed, will take training classes. There are some available. I've been doing some studying to hopefully get this appointment.
All right. Questions from the board?
What is your current employment?
I work for the United States Coast Guard as the food and beverage manager out at Air Station Cape Cod, and I also run my security business, and I also own a used car business.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't really have any questions. I know Mr. Braga, known him for quite some time. Know that the church I go to, that he runs just the security aspect there, and to keep people from parking there, and to go to the beach on certain days of the summer. So I'm very familiar with him, and personally, and as well as professionally. I know he's an umpire, and he knows how to be an impartial third party, but that would be the length of my comments.
Well, I don't have a question, but it's like I've known Ron for a long, long time, and I know that any of the endeavors that he's chosen to get involved in over the course of time, he's always done well and very thoughtfully, and so I can't say I was surprised that you were interested in being a constable, but I can understand why that's something that you might want to do, and that would fit in with all the other activities that you do now.
It kind of involved in being in the security industry.
Yeah.
I will just say in closing that I feel that this job, it involves one word, and that's integrity. And I think I've built up 40 years of that in my community. And I will guarantee you that my style on capious warrants and things like that, nature, that I'm not running around to try and handcuff people and bring them into court over issues. My policy would be to try and negotiate, to have them meet me at court, because to arrest them, you have to do it in the daytime, because there's no place to hold them. You have to bring them to the court, and I don't want to embarrass people, so I'm not as I said in my interview at the police department, I'm not a 25-year-old, I'm 56 years old, I'm not a wannabe cop. I know the guidelines of this job. As you can see with all this paperwork here, I've been studying it, and I have more in the back, so that worry can be put to rest.
Do you have any concern about being a constable?
No. I think being a constable is a lot of negotiations to help work, and not only with the landlord, but with the tenant. And Tommy Zines was actually impressed with, in my situation, and I was emotionally attached to that situation. I had a financial interest, how calm I was dealing with the young lady, and even when we went to court, the arbitrator even said that when we went to the mediator. When we went to before him, he said how well my documentation was, how everything was presented really nice. I take after my brother David on that stuff. He taught me all that. So.
I have another question. I'm sure you remember the reason we have constables is because years and years ago, when the police department didn't have the staff anymore, or they didn't have enough people for overtime to be at town hall,
Town meeting.
to be there at town meeting. So all of a sudden, we had to find constables to be able to do that, and that's how it all came about. So I'm wondering if you're also interested in the process serving end of being a constable.
Absolutely.
You are? Okay.
Absolutely. And I did put down, I think on my application, I put that I would be willing to work town meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you did say that.
I'm sure there's a rotation list for that, but however it works, I'd be a team player, however they would like to do it.
Okay.
But I would be there for that too.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I'm all set.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
And next up, we have Mr. Ruta. Did I pronounce that correctly? Yes, you did. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be a constable.
My name is Tom Ruta. I've been on the Cape about 4 years now. I grew up about an hour from here in the Mansfield-Foxborough area. I have a background, my background is construction, but I've been through the Department of Corrections Academy. I worked in Norfolk County Prison for about 8 years. I'm very versed on police procedure and dealing with not good situations, having worked in a prison.
Questions?
Have you been a constable in any other town?
No, I
over the
haven't.
years? This is your
No,
first time?
My first time. I've done a little bit of private security, and like I said, I've worked for Norfolk County in the prison for a number of years, but no constable work.
And what interests you about being a constable and the various activities like the process serving or the getting involved in evictions or even just being present at town meeting?
I just want to, I'm new to the community, I want to get involved, and just, I plan on being here for a long time, so I figured what better way to, get back involved into it.
And currently, what is your profession? Would you be making your living doing
No,
this?
I do construction, and I manage Cape Cod Auto Detail part-time also.
Okay.
I'll ask the same question. Do you have any concerns about what it would be like to be a constable for Falmouth?
None whatsoever.
Any other questions?
Um,
Do we want to take this under advisement?
Can I just?
Sure.
I'm all set there, but I think it's important that the memo from the Falmouth Police Department be read into the record for both of the candidates.
Okay, we can do that. So, letter from the Falmouth Police Department, Chief Edward Dunn, May 31, 2013. Attached, please find the background investigation for Mr. Ronald Braga, a new candidate for constable. As a result of the investigation, we feel he is a suitable candidate for constable. Also included background investigation for Mr. Thomas Ruta, a new candidate for constable of the town of Falmouth. As a result of the investigation, we have concerns as to his suitability for constable. The chief did not elaborate on that. You might want to go back to him if you have any question about his recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what we have for the board.
So I would make a motion that we take it under advisement and reschedule the vote for at a future date.
All right. So we have a motion to take this under advisement. Do we have a
Second.
second? We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thanks.
All right, and we've rolled through the other items on our agenda, the minutes, the summary of actions. So that brings us to individual selectmen's reports and the town manager's report. Do you have any updates from the board?
Just have one question about timetable for new liaison assignments.
Probably as soon as possible. We should probably sit down and look at the list and
Okay.
get it back to the board within the next few weeks. Perhaps aim for, well, the committees, all of the appointments begin on July 1st, so around the beginning of June, if we were to say by the beginning of July, hopefully have those assignments done so that the members of this board can begin working with their, or begin knowing who their liaison assignments will be. Okay. Any other updates from the board? Okay. And Mr. Suso, do you have any updates for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple. On Thursday and Friday, this past May 30th and 31st, I attended the spring meeting of the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association. This included helpful updates on several legal and related matters in the Commonwealth, as well as an important training opportunity, and I thank the board for that. I also wanted to advise the board that we've been notified by the Mass Audubon that we have an active piping plover nest on Woodneck Beach, and that is being monitored by them. They're also taking a look at Monadnock Beach, where The board will recall we had a nest last year. When that is verified, of course, those nesting areas are cordoned off, fenced off, and we appreciate the cooperation of the general public in not interfering with the nesting of that important bird. And also regarding Woodneck Beach, the general understanding would be that if biology transpires as it normally does with those birds, that the chicks would be what's called fledglings and leaving the nest approximately some point after July 19th, at which the fencing would be able to be removed at that time, so stay tuned on that. I also want to welcome newly elected Selectman Rebecca Moffett to the board. I look forward to working with you, and I'm at your service, as are members of my staff. Also, I want to welcome and congratulate new Chair Brent Putnam and Vice Chair Doug Jones. I look forward to working with you in those new capacities, and I want to thank past Chairman Kevin Murphy for his leadership and work ethic during his year as Chairman of the Board of Selectmen as well. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that brings us to the end of everything.
Motion to adjourn. Oh, you have something?
One last thing,
Oh, okay.
just a look ahead, the calendar, we've obviously got the meeting next week, the 17th. It looks like the 24th will be our bye week this month.
The 17th, I will be out of town, just to let people know that I will not
Okay.
be at that meeting. I'll be in Greece
All right, Greece.
with 15 children.
Ah. All right, and then the only other thing, other than the liaison assignments, the other thing the board as a whole, we should start consider a date for our retreat. Ms. Moffett, for your edification, I don't know if you're aware of it, but every year the board has a retreat where we sit down and go over our 5-year strategic plan and modify it and look ahead to the direction we want to move the town in. So sometime, probably want to aim to do that sometime before the 4th of July, I would think.
Are you looking at like a Saturday morning, Mr. Chairman?
Usually we do a Saturday, so if you all have some ideas for dates, if you could funnel it my way, and then we'll see what we can arrange.
I just on a personal note, if we go much later than the 22nd, it really gets into my busy season, and Saturdays are a tough day for me to give up, so
Okay.
if the board could try to shoot for something like the 22nd, it would be great.
Okay.
Unless that's a
I'll
bad...
be back.
Sorry?
I'll be back.
All right. Do we-
22nd sounds good here.
Works for me.
All right, so then let's plan for the morning of the 22nd and see if we can't get that scheduled. Will that work?
That will work for me, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
But Heather's not here.
Not all staff members are necessarily available, but
Okay. Well, we could potentially do it the 15th, although that only gives us 2 weeks. Well, you're going to be, so the 22nd then. All right. All right, well, we'll aim for the 22nd.
I'll watch it.
All right, and with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
That is a second. All in favor?
Aye.